Many family island communities had grown used to hearing about infrastructure that was always planned, always discussed, and too often delayed. This contract will deliver major airside works at Roxanne International Airport. It includes reconstruction and overlay of the existing runway to meet ICAO standards. Since 2021, the government has expanded and accelerated airport development across the Bahamas. 3 airports have already been completed at Ragged Island, Great Harbor Key, and Maguana. 10 more are underway or under active construction, including projects at Governor's Harbor, North Lutra, with Roxanne now joining that active list. Cat Island is also included. 2. This project, Roxanne and South Lutra, is for you and reflects the direction we will continue to pursue. Strong practical investments that expand opportunity across all of our islands. Thank you. Effective April 1st, all foods currently at 5% VAT will be VAT-free. 0 VAT on those food items.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Prime Minister's weekly press briefing. It's good to see all of you, as usual. This morning, we will be discussing, which is perhaps the government's highest priority, which is the safety of its people. We're joined by Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Munro. Now, as you all would know, because you were obviously a part of that coverage, the police recently released crime statistics revealing some very favorable statistics about crime and the downward trend being taken in serious crimes in particular. Minister Munro will discuss that along with some of the government initiatives which led to those decreases. He will also discuss some of the internal issues facing the armed forces and the government's interventions in that regard, as well as some of the upgrades in the physical plants at the police accommodations in particular. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome to the podium Minister of National Security, the Honorable Wayne Munro. Mr. Munro.
Thank you, Keisla, and good morning, Bahamas. A number of members of the press towards the end of 2025 approached me for comments about the statistics, the crime stats, particularly the statistics for murder. At that time, I indicated that the Commissioner of Police would be providing a briefing about the time that she would, and I would address those matters after she'd have provided the comprehensive briefing. And that briefing has taken place, and so this is a fulfillment of that promise to the press to address the crime stats. I begin by saying, as I said from the outset of me assuming this post, that I do not count homicide beyond 1, because 1 is too many. But the Commissioner of Police has helpfully set out what the statistics show. And for reference, we use these statistics in terms of planning policies and in terms of evaluating the effectiveness of policies. And so it was announced that major crime was down 15% over the previous year, and the regional decreases were given across the islands. That crimes against a person decreased by 27%, that homicides decreased by 31% to 83 incidents compared to 120 in 2024. For reference, in the pandemic year, the murder count was 78 when we were all locked down and there was police presence all over the streets. And so the number for last year was just 5 more than that time. Interestingly, the police also tracks the dates and times that homicides occur most frequently. And the report is that homicides were more likely to occur on a Sunday, on a blessed Sunday, than any other day during the week. And as you may imagine, the police will be looking at these statistics in planning how they proceed. Armed robberies decreased by 39%. Robberies, which are just stealing by violence, decreased by 22%. The offense that increased was stolen vehicles, that increased by 2%. And if you recall from last year, stolen vehicles also increased last year. And stealing from vehicles is also up by 7%, and that had increased as well. You will note that people will steal cars for a number of reasons, one being to commit offenses, and the other being to sell on to other persons and to strip for parts. I mention that because members of the public, apparently law-abiding members of the public, must be playing a part in purchasing vehicles that are otherwise than validly obtained, and potentially for buying parts that may have been stripped from a stolen vehicle. And so the public can assist with driving down this statistic by not participating in those types of events. Housebreaking was down by 49%, shop breaking by 13%, and a report was made on firearms seized, 366, 11,238 rounds of ammunition, and the police aggressively carried out road checks, contrary to what I hear sometimes in the talk shows. The police carried out in total 24,947 road checks, field check patrols. And so those are the statistics. Now let me say that we attribute this decrease to the whole of government, whole of society effort that we have been advocating. And by that we mean every agency of the government must participate and has been participating, and the public must participate, and the public has been participating across the entire country, from churches to civic groups to many others. And I hope to touch on that shortly. The 5-pillar approach that we articulated from 2022, and there's a record of it when I attended the Public Policy Institute at the University of the Bahamas, namely prevention, policing, prosecution, punishment, and rehabilitation. We have steadfastly kept to that. The commissioner reported on the policing aspect of that. I will have just slight things to say there. but under prevention. You may recall that the Honorable Prime Minister put together that task force, the Anti-Gang and Crime Task Force, co-chaired by myself as Minister of National Security and the Minister of Education, with the Minister of Health, Economic Affairs, Youth and Sport, Social Services, Works, and Urban Renewal as a part of that task force to organize and drive policy. We can say that that task force has been very active and has reaped some good rewards. On the prevention side, you would have noticed that when the PLP assumed office, there were no police officers in schools. We now have school resource officers across the Commonwealth making an impact. That's a policing effort, but that's on prevention. We instituted the HYPE program in primary schools, helping young people excel. And that is because we saw someone as young as 15 charged with murder. And so determination was made that junior high and high school was too late to intervene. Because by the time somebody is 15 and willing to take a life, that has been coming on for quite some time. HYPE is ongoing. Let's Swim Bahamas, you would have been aware of, teaching young primary schoolers how to swim, but more importantly, on the ride to the pool, introducing them to memory verses, songs and prayers to seek to affect their socialization if they may not have been getting it at home. You would be aware that the Royal Bahamas Police Force cadets and the Royal Bahamas Defense Force Rangers programs were revitalized and increased. You would be aware that we're going into the 6th cohort of the National Youth Guard, which is due to go in on Saturday, hopefully in taking 185 young people who are eager to learn and be able to upgrade their abilities to serve their country. You would be aware of the Upskill Initiative that seeks to provide opportunities for young persons, the apprenticeship program that seeks to provide apprenticeship and opportunities for young people. I mention this because opportunity is important, that persons do not feel as if they have no options. I would like also to make you aware of our programs involving community centers. We believe that if you have a proper sense of community, you would not be able to stand over another human being and fire 10, 20 rounds of ammunition into his body. We believe that if you have a proper sense of community, you would not see a lot of what we see today. This week is Community Center Awareness Week. We began on Monday at the Edmund Moxie Community Center with lunch and lessons. Continued on Tuesday at the Fox Hill Community Center with food, folks, and fun. And it then moved on yesterday to the Nassau Village Community Center with chefing it up for elderly and disabled persons. And I'd like to publicly thank Chef Simeon Hall Jr., who supervised the feeding of the many elderly and disabled persons who attended that event. Today, the Kwaku Street Community Center has cultural vibes and Junkanoo going on right now. On Saturday, 6 a.m., there's a fun run walk that will end at Edmund Moxie Community Center, and the public is invited to register and participate. So that is a policy that was initiated under the late B.J. Nottage when he was Minister of National Security. We built on that occasion the Fox Hill Community Center, Edmund Moxie Community Center, and Kwaku Street Community Center was gifted by the late Bradley Roberts family. We have under construction at the moment the Centerville Community Center. The Mount Moriah Community Center pool has been completed and handed over to the government. The Freetown Community Center pool has been started and is in an advanced state of construction. The Angliston Community Center is about to begin. The Pinewood Community Center is under contract. The Carmichael, Golden Isles, Central and South Eleuthera, and Pine Ridge Community Centers are at the point of contracting to begin. And it is hoped that within the next month, all of those centers will be underway. I make the point quite clearly that this administration is committed to community centers as a way of bringing together the community. It is unfortunate that the previous administration was not. Not only did they not build a community center, but they let the pool at the Fox Hill Community Center turn green for inactivity and lack of upkeep. We see great promise in these community centers. We've already been approached by 2 swim clubs who wish to use the Mount Moriah pool. Let's Swim Bahamas has already indicated 3 or 4 primary schools that they will use that facility to train. We hope that this progress can be built upon. The Commissioner mentioned the Clear Hole Build initiative, and the task force will, in short order, report on the entire activity there together with the surveys that were held after those initiatives were completed. Just as a teaser, I would mention that the surveys showed that the persons surveyed had greater faith and confidence in the police than they did in religious leaders, political leaders, and community leaders. And so when that is rolled out, you will see exactly the impact of that policy. We are proud to say that we have provided the Royal Bahamas Police Force, and for that matter, the Defense Force and the Department of Corrections, with more manpower. We have recruited consistently, and we continue to recruit. A new squad of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force should go in February, and the police force should have a new squad going in shortly thereafter. Manpower is important for them to properly do their jobs. We've also resourced the security services, not only with vehicles, but with technology. You would have seen the provision of additional vessels to the Defense Force and the sending of 3 vessels back to Daman for complete refit. I must say that we have more work to do, and there is more that we will be doing to address the conditions in which the Royal Bahamas Police Force and Defense Force carry out their services. For the Defense Force, we will be seeking to build bases where they may be properly accommodated in their outposts. We have reviewed the state of the police building infrastructure across the archipelago, and that is in great need of upgrade. I have a meeting later this afternoon together with the Commissioner of Police with regard to rebuilding of the West End Police Station, which was condemned in the previous administration, was left idle until we demolish it. We hope to begin to rebuild it, and we will have to address police infrastructure across the islands. I wish to report that the virtual court at BDOCS not only has commenced, but should begin to move apace to permit for the commencement of the construction of the new correctional facility. All of this is progress under this administration that we hope to continue. Let me take this time to address an issue of welfare. It's been reported in the press this year, last year as well, issues touching and concerning a communication sent by the Police Staff Association to its members relative to the insurance coverage. As a fact, Kalina is responsible not only for the coverage of Royal Bahamas Police Force officers, but Royal Bahamas Defense Force Marines and officers, Bahamas Department of Corrections officers, and in fact, for the insurance that covers me and other cabinet ministers. I have seen the correspondence. On the last occasion when there was an allegation that officers were denied service, the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of National Security was directed to address the matter, even though the letter was not directed to us. There was a meeting held with Kalina and the Financial Secretary, which my Permanent Secretary attended. Police officers, if there are any, who are denied service, are reminded that there is a process to contest the denial of any service by the carrier. I hasten to add that we have received no indication of any police officer who has been denied service. We've received nothing from the Correctional Staff Association suggesting that that is happening to their members. We have received nothing from the Royal Bahamas Defense Force indicating that any of their Marines or officers have been denied service. I happen to have to use the policy that relates to me, and I have had no difficulty using it. What I would like the Bahamian public to know is that the Ministry of National Security takes very seriously its obligation to the service members that guard, and protect us. I have always had an open door policy. We meet with the Royal Bahamas Defense Force personnel at least once a year, and whenever they ask for meetings with the minister. We meet with the Bahamas Department of Correctional Staff Association at least once a year, and whenever they ask to meet with us. They have requested many meetings, and they raise many issues about the welfare of their members, including why are our promotions not going through? Anything that concerns their members, they raise directly with the ministry, and we are obliged to address it. The one organization that steadfastly refuses to meet with the ministry is the Police Staff Association. When we assumed office, there was a meeting with them. They've had one other meeting. They've never raised any issue directly with the ministry. Recently, they sent a correspondence to the Office of the Prime Minister that was directed to the ministry with oversight of the police force. I've asked the Permanent Secretary to set a meeting with them. The Police Staff Association can take a lesson from the Bahamas Department of Correctional Services Staff Association, who have advocated quite aggressively for their members, have held us to account for getting through the bureaucratic red tape that can sometimes hold up promotions, reinstatements, restoration of increments. They have been very aggressive in demanding meetings with the ministry and pleading the case of their members. I would perhaps suggest that the Police Staff Association ought to have a meeting with the Correctional Staff Association, who may be able to assist them in pointing out how they may navigate getting vital assistance for their members and how they may engage the ministry on behalf of their members. Finally, any policeman who does encounter an issue, as your staff association is not communicating it to the ministry, we would ask you to communicate it directly to the ministry. That brings me lastly to rehabilitation. I've already mentioned the virtual court and the new correctional facility. The public would be aware that we completed some time back a male juvenile detention facility. There's currently underway the female juvenile detention facility to ensure that young persons are kept separate from adults and from persons older than them, even if they still are themselves not fully 21. We report that we continue to invest in recruitment to the correctional services and to their continued training. It is only by a whole of government, whole of society effort across this 5-pillar strategy that we've been able to have this success. We thank everyone who participated in it, particularly the public, who has seen and bought into the vision of the Prime Minister for addressing safety in the community. We as a village, we as a community can crack the back of crime as the statistics show. And I encourage all Bahamians to participate in the effort. With that, I would open the floor for questions.
I know you said with the insurance, police have never been, or any other law enforcement agents who have this insurance were not denied coverage, but the recent reports are saying their spouses and the children who are dependents on the policy, they were denied coverage. So
prior to the restriction in 2023.
So basically, can you explain, what Kalina said about that allegation? Have they seen, or what's the policy regarding dependence on the insurance?
Well, that's two issues. The first issue is that there was a policy change for new entrants to the service, that the dependent coverage would not be extended to the dependents, but we would cover the officers themselves. The justification for covering the security forces as opposed to any other government worker was the danger associated with their job. For persons who had coverage for their dependents before, if your dependent who was covered is denied service, the same applies to them. We've received no identification of any eligible dependent who has not received service. The Police Staff Association is able to report those to us as well, and police officers and their dependents who may have encountered that, because the same thing applies to the dependent. If you're refused service, there's a process by which you apply. So for instance, if you flew off to the US and you tried to get service and you were denied, the policy may say they don't cover that and you should have gotten pre-approved before you left. So there are issues like that that you can raise. But the dependents, if you refuse service, eligible police officer who has refused service, the job of the staff association isn't to write you letters. It's to bring your case forward to the ministry, exactly what the Correctional Staff Association does. When anything affects their members, they complain vociferously to the ministry. And we're pleased to say that we've been able to address all of their concerns as to their entitlement. The Correctional Staff Association also is bold enough to come and advocate for things that they would like to see for their members, not only what their members are entitled to, but to advocate for what they would like to see for their members directly with the ministry. And so the request that if you are refused service, clearly the Police Staff Association is not identifying persons to the ministry. We would ask you to please communicate it directly with the ministry so that we can address it. Your representatives are not forwarding the information to us. We would ask you to forward it directly to us if you encounter those problems.
I know in that letter too, they also made some explosive allegations about this 100 million Akalina that the government owes. I mean, do you know anything about this balance that they're talking about, or they're alleging that's there that is leading to this reported denial of insurance coverage?
Well, once we have any proof of any denial, then that becomes our business. As I say, this is the same Kalina that manages everybody's coverage. The meeting with the financial secretary that my permanent secretary was a part of included the carrier. And the outcome was, if anybody has a refusal, there's a process by which you challenge it.
Minister Monroe, earlier this week, the Commissioner indicated that the 2 cases currently being investigated under the Anti-Gang Act still haven't made it to court. What's the hold-up?
To put it in a manner that is acceptable, we have asked for an amendment to the Criminal Evidence Witness Anonymity Act, which currently sets out, provides for witness anonymity in certain matters. It doesn't currently provide for witness anonymity in anti-gang matters. And the thinking is very simple. When you think of organized crime, the witnesses may be persons who have seen the light and decided to turn over a no leaf, not participate anymore, or to help take down the gang. The participants may be agents, as everyone who watches TV sees. The moment that you file a complaint and you list your witnesses, they will become known. If they are civilians, they may well become targets. If they are law enforcement officials undercover, their usefulness will then cease once it is known. And what has happened in the murder cases, for instance, with witness anonymity, you are able to redact statements to protect the identity of the witness up to a point. Now, at a point, the lawyers will say, I have to know the identity of my accuser. But the police have asked, and I have recently renewed with the Attorney General and law reform a request for that one amendment to insert offenses under the Anti-Gang Act. And I think it's the Criminal Evidence Witness Anonymity Act.
If I'm not mistaken, I think you raised that concern before. Is that an amendment you think could likely happen during this term in office?
I have, as I say, I've recently renewed the request for it. It is really simple amendment, the insertion of a paragraph into that act.
And what do you make of Martin Roth basically labeling the entire system in the Bahamas, whether it's law enforcement, police, defense force, and government officials, as corrupted?
That's the defense lawyer.
Yeah, that's the defense lawyer, Darren Roker.
I label him as a lawyer trying to get his client less time. As a matter of fact, Transparency International ranks us exactly the same as the US on the corruption index. I think it's at 28 out of 180 countries. So we're exactly the same as America. They came down to 28. We came up to 28. So we were below 28. In 2024, we came up to 28. The fact of the matter is that in that same federal court in December 2025, the same prosecution indicted a former DEA agent with criminally facilitating trafficking. And so across every organization, you may find a bad apple. Bahamians just need to Google DEA agent, charged, convicted, and you will see that it is a matter that happens. I think the commissioner, the prime minister, everyone puts it correctly. One bad apple does not taint an entire organization. I like to say that the test is what happens when you find that bad apple. Do you cover it? That members of the armed forces, of the security forces, our defense force, well, a police officer was recently convicted in a case brought by. That shows and demonstrates that when they are found wanting, it is of a cover-up. And so the same thing that people say causes alarm, that the police put police officers before the court. They put Defense Force Marines and officers before the courts, correctional officers before the courts. You may think that, look at what these fellas are doing. Well, I would ask you to say, look at what the police are doing, who are putting them before the court. They're not condoning the behavior, and they're seeking to root it out. But, I guess he was trying to get a lesser sentence for his client by saying, don't blame him, blame the culture he is drawn from. That is inaccurate of the organization he comes from, inaccurate of the country that he comes from.
The commissioner was skewered for saying she was offended by his comments. What do you think it will take for the public to, I guess, have a higher perception of law enforcement?
Who's skewered?
I mean, social media comments. There was a lot of negativity regarding her saying she's offended. People said what he said may be offensive, but it doesn't make it not true. And this is a new commissioner who they're saying this about. So what do you think it would take for the public perception of law enforcement to change?
Well, that's not the public perception of law enforcement. Remember now, the fellow say, all of y'all, all of us corrupt, not just the police. So anyone who wants to stand with him must put their hand up and say, I admit I'm corrupt. Because he didn't cast aspersions just over an organization, over a country. And so any Bahamian who will wish to support somebody who's accusing you of being corrupt because of something one man does, then you clearly must be corrupt if you're accepting that description. It is right and just for you to be offended by an American who must know that their police officers, federal agents, are put before the courts when they do wrong, to seek to use that to label everybody in a country. Why would you not be offended by that? It is as if there's one bad woman and we say all Bahamian women are bad. One bad man and we say all Bahamian men are bad. And women rightly get offended by it, and men would rightly get offended by it. I mean, it may seem a light example, but that's exactly what it is. You have one bad woman, one bad man, and people will say, all Bahamian women are bad, all Bahamian men are bad. And there's a song about it, eh? Man bad, woman bad. And you should be offended by it because you are being painted by a brush of one person.
Tagging on to that, there were people in our society that are saying, while we do is one bad apple, there is a lack of anti-corruption policies. That you have the low, I don't know if this is outside of your scope, but there is a low funding for the Freedom of Information Act. And while we do have the Independent Investigation Commission, people may be, I guess, disappointed with the progress of that. What do you say to those people that feel like we don't have these strong enforcement of those, and that anti-corruption policies are low on this administration's agenda?
Well, I don't understand what they mean by low funding of anti-corruption policies. I have to, by the end of February, disclose the details of my finances. That's very public. When the election is called, I will have to disclose again in a fuller form. And persons, no doubt, will look at my disclosure in 2017, 2021, and 2026 and make their comparisons. If that doesn't permit you to hold somebody to account, I don't know what other information will permit you to hold them to account. In fact, my permanent secretary alerted all persons of which we have oversight who have a disclosure obligation. A lot of this information that people say they want under the Freedom of Information Act is available in open source material. In fact, yesterday at the House of Assembly, the member for St. Barnabas talked about the SpaceX Falcon, I think it's Falcon 9 information, the EIA, all of that we were withholding it when it's available on a website, and all you have to do is Google it. The thing that holds you accountable is when people make complaints and they are investigated, and if you are found wanting, you are charged. And that has been happening with great frequency of service people, of other public servants, of politicians, even rising to the level of cabinet ministers. It's been happening over the last decade frequently. So I don't understand when they say a lack of investment.
Minister, I read the Tribune on Tuesday. There was an article there with Ministry of Foreign Affairs employee along with 3 Grand Bahamian residents involved in this visa fraud scheme amounting up to $14,000. I guess my question for you is, how do national security, immigration, and foreign affairs coordinate to insulate the process from these sort of internal fraud schemes, and how has this situation exposed any gaps, if there is?
Well, firstly, when we assumed office, there was an organization called HONLIA. It stands for Heads of All National Law Enforcement Agencies. It was not used by the other side, was my information. I revived it. We have regular meetings. That would be the Commissioner of Police, Commissioner of Corrections, the Commander Defense Force, Director Immigration, the Controller of Customs, the Director of the National Intelligence Agencies. We meet to talk about things generally so we don't work in silos. Again, the story that somebody was charged means the system detected a crime, investigated it, found sufficient information to put the person before the court. The starting point for viewing it is you just have some wicked people who will do things that are bad. The test of a system is, are you able to identify who has done what? And if you don't, then you have to put controls in the system. I once did a case with an agency I won't mention, who cashiers were able to collect hundreds of thousands of dollars hand it over to a supervisor without ever signing to say how much money they gave the supervisor. And so when cash was missing, you could not say where it went missing from. The fact that somebody, a bad actor, may take some money, you control that by looking at who you hire, by perhaps putting in place camera surveillance to stop it. But if perchance somebody finds a way to do it, your system should permit you to identify that she has to answer for this because she is the person who had this book that found itself in the public. And so that is what you do. You continue to review your systems to ensure that it is designed in a way to identify any wrongdoers.
So are you saying that you're confident that this is an isolated issue and not indicative of like a wider problem?
That area doesn't fall under agency that I have oversight of. That would be under Foreign Affairs if that's a passport. If it's something with immigration, that's under immigration. Although we have general meetings, I'm not briefed on the internal workings of those agencies, and I particularly do not accept briefing on operational matters with the police force.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Minister Monroe, for that very comprehensive view on things, on matters related to the armed forces. Well, that's our hour. Are there any additional questions? Yes.
Yes, just wanted to see if we can get a comment from the Office of the Prime Minister in regards to the alleged strike that's going on at PMH right now with the nurses and the overtime payments. I guess any word as to, how this is affecting hospital operations today?
Well, let me start by saying the provision of health care is a priority of the government, and where there are shortfalls, whether human resources or otherwise, it's deeply troubling. Now, having said that, an assessment is underway today to try and determine the extent of the problem and to make sure that coverage is in place where needed and that it's prioritized, as is the case in emergency situations and scenarios like these. In the meantime, we are very hopeful to speak with the relevant union stakeholders to get a handle on the problem, to speak about the situation and to come to a resolution so that the public health system can return to full strength as soon as possible.
So just to be clear, it could be confirmed that some amount of nurses didn't show up today.
That is the report, as far as I can tell. All right. Thank you very much, everyone.